Thank you.
Alexandre, Philippe.
Thank you very much.
And we enormously regret that the Billy's not here, but he wrote to both of us just before just before the beginning of the screening, and he had a sudden health issue, so he couldn't make it. But he wished everyone, he very much wished he was here, and because he really loved this movie, and it's a testament to Alexandre's filmmaking.
Well, and we have a big crew here as well, so which I would like everybody to give a hand. We have Carrie Roy, producer, and kind of my sister in crime, really. There's my mother, who's here actually, who's visiting, of course. We have David, our amazing editor. We put this thing together in a month and a half. I don't even know how it happened, but it did. Anthony Whedon, who did a lot of the music. Annick Manert, co-producer. That's it, I think. Yes. Okay. Anyway.
Okay, I'm gonna start with the questions.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of you are familiar with Alexandre's work. His films are essays on, and they very often center on one individual film. This last one was called Memory and was about Alien. So my logical question is why The Exorcist?
There was no plan actually to make a film about The Exorcist. I just happened to be at the Sitges Film Festival, which I've been to many times now, 2 years ago, and Billy was getting the Lifetime Achievement Award, and I was having lunch with Gary Sherman in one of the many restaurants there on the port, and then all of a sudden there's a voice behind me that says, "Hey, Alex." I turn around, and it's William Friedkin. And he says, I've heard so much about your film, which was 7852, the film that I had made about the psycho shower scene. He said, come over here, I want to tell you some stories about Hitch. So I joined him at his table, and he grabs my phone, and he gives me his email, and he says, when you're in LA, I want to buy you lunch. So I go have lunch with him, and very quickly the conversation turns to The Exorcist, and he basically said, he started talking about all his archival material, and he says, if you wanted to have access, I'd gladly give you access. I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, read my autobiography, and if you find an angle, just let me know. And so that's kind of how it started, and I basically instantly sort of saw this as a one-man show, in a way. I didn't want to get into the things that we all know already, the special effects and all of that, and I wanted this to be about his process, and it turned into an epic 6-day interview, and the result is this.
And I read that you watched the film for 30 days.
30 days straight. I went to a vineyard in Northern California and watched the film every day for 30 days and started getting some pretty bad nightmares actually after a while. But every day something new started coming to the surface, and I was working on sort of structuring, my approach and my thoughts on sort of how to do this with him. I mean, initially he gave me 3 days, and then it turned into a fourth and a fifth and a sixth, there could easily be a seventh and an eighth. I mean, he's as he's unbelievable. Yeah.
Why do you think? The Exorcist is one of William Friedkin's more successful films, but why do you think it's so important in his filmography to him as well?
Well, I think it really contains pretty much everything that he believes in, and I think it contains a lot of his sort of it contains all of his artistic integrity. And that's why I think it was so interesting to me to do this really deep dive into the film, because you realize very quickly that all of these influences from art and from music and thoughts and ideas about faith and fate, which is really the foundation of his belief, not just I think for his art, but also in life. It's all there, and so to me, to look at The Exorcist, but to look at The Exorcist through this particular lens is a way to understand William Friedkin better as a filmmaker and as a human. you know. And I think that's what's so fascinating and really moving. I mean, the Kyoto monologue just completely took me by surprise. And I mean, it was pretty clear to me after that was on day 4, that we had to go to Kyoto. You know, we didn't really have the budget, did we, Carrie, to go to Kyoto? But we found a way, and I mean, you know, I can understand why he was so moved by it. We spent just 4 days there, and I remember being on the bullet train back to Tokyo after those 4 days and the stuff that we shot, and I felt like I had been in a dream for 4 days. I want to go back. I know it's funny because he keeps telling me like how much he wants to go back to Kyoto. He hasn't been since. But the moment I left, I felt like I got to go back, you know.
Bill is an extremely unpretentious man, and by watching his film, you don't imagine, you don't really think that there is such deep process, that this process relates so deeply with other arts. Did you expect that? You know, and the way that the painting and the music, they think come up, and literature come in his films and his life is. It's really interesting because there are no, it's not a show off. You don't see them, but it's all there.
Well, and that's where I think that, you know, that's what I think makes his cinema so great. It's not the stuff that you notice right away. It's what you don't notice. And the more you start looking at these little details and the way that he thinks, the more interesting those films become. You know, I mean, what I love is that he has a very thoughtful process as a filmmaker. And I love that he is so openly willing now to reflect on it, to say, well, maybe I wouldn't do things this way now. You know, one of the most interesting moments to me is when he talks about the climax of I mean, it's one of the most, you know, beloved scenes in one of the most iconic movies of all time. And to him, it's scars and fine leather. Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, But you know, to me, it's so refreshing as well for the next generation or the new generations of filmmakers to look at this, because when you think about Friedkin, you think about, you know, of course, the sort of the maverick, you know, the extremely confident filmmaker, which he was, but he was also not so sure about certain things. And I think that those ideas, that those icons never make a mistake or never you know, think twice about something is wrong. I mean, we now know about Hitchcock. You know, there's always this you know, this Hitchcock the showman, right? This idea that you know, the picture is already basically shot in his mind before he goes and rolls the camera because it's already there. But you know, we now know, if we read the book by Bill Crone, Hitchcock at Work, that this is false. He was actually collaborating with actors. You know. So I think it's really refreshing to know that you know, Hitchcock and Friedkin and Orson Welles, you know, they're human as well.
I've had the pleasure to interview Billy for a few consecutive days. Tell me a little bit about your interview. I mean, how did you get him to trust you? Because he's not an immediate trusting person.
This is what's funny, right? Because I think, as you know, he's very intuitive. Obviously, he talks about intuition. I mean, he literally saw me for 30 seconds in Sitges. Why was it that he called me to his table? Why was it that he took my phone? I don't really know. He never once asked what I was doing. The only thing he said, you know, is, are you sure you don't want to interview Max or Ellen or Linda? And I kept saying, no. I said, this is you. But he never pushed back. He just asked me a couple of times. He never asked to watch anything until eventually, you know, obviously the film was done and you guys had accepted it, and, you know. But I don't know. What I do know is that there is some weird talking about fate about this. I mean, he's told me that, you know, I was part of the fate of The Exorcist. I'm not sure what that means. I hope that's a good omen. You know, David, our amazing editor, I mean, we met in a cab ride at Hot Docs in Toronto. We got picked up together going from the airport to the hotel.
You didn't know each other before?
We did not know each other. We were flat out of money. We didn't have the means to get the film done. I really wanted to get it made, so hopefully it would, you guys would consider it, because I knew how much Venice meant to Billy. And literally, like a few months ago, I went to his house, and I was almost like, I was ashamed. I said, look, Billy, I don't think we're going to be able to get the film finished for consideration for Venice. And he said, well, it's got to be this year, and if it's not this year, things might change. And I said, well, okay, I just don't know that we can. And so I, went to Carrie, and I said, I don't know what to do. And then I met David, and we had a conversation about this film, and we totally sort of clicked. But again, it was a real intuition thing. And I told Carrie, I said, it's crazy, but let me just call this David guy, and maybe he'll want to just take a leap of faith. And sure enough, I call him, and he says, oh man, he's like, I've been thinking about this film and how jealous I was that somebody else would get to cut it. And I said, well, what are you doing in the next couple of months? And we put this thing, it was like a fever, because I was traveling around the world with Memory. And so basically when
Memory
David,
is the film about Alien,
the film about Alien.
Film.
So when David was working, I was asleep. I would wake up, review the stuff, work on my notes, go to bed, and he'd take over. So we were like on a 24/7, and yeah, I mean we put it together in a month and a half.
Yes, I have to say that when he had a cut for us to see, I think he sent it, and then he said, and I'm going to sleep for 3 days, so I will not be answering emails.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was the most brutal experience I think I've ever had, just cutting a film. And then Anthony and John Hagel, who's not here, who did the music, also in a month and a half. I mean, yeah.
Did he ask you to watch parts of it while you were editing? How
No. In fact, he wanted to experience it here in Venice. And which is why I'm so sad that he couldn't come. But he sent me an email after he had basically, because I asked him, and then he kept refusing. He said, "No, I'll watch it in Venice. I'll watch it in Venice." And then one night at 10:30 p.m. he sends me an email. And he says, I kind of want to see the film. I said, I don't want to have a shock in front of an audience. So I sent him the film. And then I get this email from him at 2:30 in the morning, and I had tears in my eyes. I mean, it just starts. It says, "Dear Alexandre, I have no words to express how overwhelmed I am by your film." And I mean, it was just a beautiful, moving email, and he was telling me that it essentially went to the heart of his process and of his influences, and he sent me multiple emails since then saying how proud he is, and. So I can't wait to actually experience it with him and Sherry. I think would be really great. So yeah.
Raise your hand if you have. I can go on, but if you have a question, raise your hand. There.
I'm so impressed with it, and also
Thank you.
It's very rare that. It's very rare that I think you feel the candor. I mean, he was extremely candid about maybe some of the missteps he might have taken, but it was really about trusting his faith in the filmmaking process. Was there any preconceived notion you had going in that when he might have deviated otherwise in the dialogue, you sort of went, "Wow, I wasn't expecting that"?
I mean, to be honest, it's interesting because I mean. Talking about this, what he talks about, the sleepwalker sense of security, I felt like he roped me into this thing, and I went along, and I never once questioned what we were doing. I don't think I went into it with any expectations. I think that I sensed an immediate connection with him, an immediate trust, a warmth, a real warmth, and I felt that he needed this film to exist. Which is why I was saying it's really the way that it happened was very strange, because he never explicitly said, I want you to make a film about The Exorcist. But he threw the bait, and he knew I was going to take it, So I just, we just went to all these places, and this is the beauty of documentary filmmaking. Things start happening, and then you start realizing what the film is about, and you start realizing that it's really about the mysteries of faith and fate, and these grace notes, like that moment to me is like, it encapsulates the William Friedkin that I know. And I just, like thinking back, being this little boy being raised in Switzerland, and even thinking about one day I would be a filmmaker, that I would get to meet my heroes, but that, William Friedkin would come and say, it's mind-blowing. How did that happen? And maybe he's right. Maybe that's the fate thing. I don't know. But he has certainly opened my mind and my heart in ways that I never really imagined before. And I think that what he's given me personally, just through all these conversations, it's a gift. It's a real gift for a way to think about life and live life. And I'm always going to have that. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
Yeah, and I agree that in a sense that when you say that that Billy needed to have this film, just simply because his process is his curiosity about life and about what's unresolved and about what the complexities thing, it's just infinite. And he keeps digging, and in one way he accepts that certain things have no explanation, but in the other way, his desire to know and to find out and to search is endless. So it's really satisfying to see how much he gave on this film.
Yeah, and also I would say real quick also about, it's not just what we call quote unquote high art. It's also quote unquote low art. I remember this one lunch that I had with him, and all he talked about for like 2 hours was Beavis and Butthead. He loves Beavis and Butthead. He had, in fact, Mike Judge record his voice recording on his phone in the voice of Butthead at one point. And so, he's hilarious. He's really, you never know what he's going to talk about. What he's going to surprise you with. Hey, how are you guys?
Great.
So great to see you.
Oh, it's so good.
Thank you so much.
But in 6 days, he must have talked about other things than The Exorcist. Did he go off topic about like cruising or?
No, we're really focused on The Exorcist completely. Well, let me put it this way. Obviously, he talked about some of these other films, but always in relationship to The Exorcist. And I made that very clear that I really wanted this to be sort of the absolute focal point of it. In fact, when he gave me this carte blanche to go and make, he said, go and let me know what you want to do. I came back to him and I said, what I'd like to do is use the Hitchcock-Truffaut model of interviews, but so doing all these sessions over days, but instead of doing it over your entire career, I just want to do it on The Exorcist. And so to me, that's really the way to kind of open it, in fact, to his filmography and to cinema in general, kind of like, 7852, which you guys have seen, by focusing on the shower scene, you can talk about Psycho, and you can talk about Hitchcock, and you can talk about cinema, right? So I kind of really like this approach of being very micro to start with, and then go macro from there. But we talked about, there's a lot of things I wanted to include. The one thing that I don't regret, you can't make a 2.5-hour film. You can, but you talked about Carlos Kleiber, the conductor, and how much he influenced his approach to directing, because he conducted in metaphors. And he's got some wonderful stuff there. We tried to make it work. It just didn't quite work within the context of the film, which is some of those decisions obviously you have to make, right, as you're cutting the movie. But needless to say, I'm hoping this film comes out eventually in a nice Blu-ray and with hours of additional material, because my God, we do have the goods. Yeah.
I'm wondering why. I mean, most of your actually, your films, the ones I know, are either films of horror or sci-fi, and I'm interested. No, I'm interested, which is, I love genre, so
Sure.
you have a fan, But I'm wondering why. Why do you think those genre are the ones that are, and why these films are? You want to find out more about them. Why?
Well, those films were films that influenced, that had an impact on me as a kid. I've always been a genre kid, and so now I'm a genre guy. But look, I love cinema. There's not a single genre that I won't watch if it's done well. So I inhale, all that stuff. But yeah, horror to me, horror is an extraordinarily important genre, and I don't know if I can really name any great filmmaker who, in a way, has not made. Even Ingmar Bergman, made horror movies. You could certainly argue. Tarkovsky. You go down the list. But horror is so important because it deals with a human emotion which is so extraordinarily powerful, which is fear. And I think understanding fear, understanding why we're afraid of certain things, is a way to understand ourselves. Everything we do in life or don't do in life, it's because we draw a line in the sand because we're afraid of something or not afraid of something. And so fear dictates, to a large extent, why we do and don't do. And I think that's why there's a real importance to the genre, and it's kind of weird that it's been maligned so much and continues to be to a certain extent. It's gone a long way. It's come a long way, but there's still a long way to go.
Well, which is why I think it's even more wonderful that you make these films where you go behind the appearance of low culture, and you find this relationship with art and meaningful things that about life. So thank you for making them.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for making this. They're motioning to me that we ran out of time. We have to get everyone out and prepare for another screening. I want to thank Alexandre for making the film, for being here. We dedicate this to
the wonderful people back there.
And the wonderful people up there. I'm sorry I was rude. And we're going to get out of here and call Billy and let him know that it went very well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.